Hi. We've already talked about resource planning in a project. And that is kind of closely related to the topic of today, the human resources of a project. Towever, when talking about resource planning, it's more about quantifying the resource needs for a project. Whereas today's topic is more about what are actually the needed competence for a resource that is going to work in projects. The obvious role in a project to start from is the project manager and the kind of expectations that are asserted on him. So it might be, for instance, that the boss of the project manager has certain expectations as to how the project manager should behave and lead the project. The customer certainly has certain expectations as to how the project will succeed. The personnel under the project manager may have certain expectations of how the work is going to be done. Partners, like suppliers or contractors, other stakeholders, all have expectations. And it maybe goes without saying, but oftentimes these expectations can be rather contradictory. So actually one kind of characteristic of project work and the work of a project manager especially is to be able to balance in this crossfire. We can list a number of, say, common, maybe somewhat trivial characteristics of a good project manager. First and foremost, he needs to be time-oriented. Projects are about keeping time, right? He needs to be able to tolerate uncertainty, because projects are actually about managing uncertainty, living with changing expectations, for instance. Obviously, a project manager needs to be result and performance, and to some extent also future-oriented. He's supposed to deliver results. A project manager also needs some sort of sense for detail, because the devil actually lies in the details. Maybe goes without saying, but a good project manager should be flexible, practical, and committed to his work. But at the same time, optimistic, energetic, emphatic, and he should trust in other people, as well as, in a way, be a person who can be trusted. And maybe, most of all, in a way, summing this up, is that a project manager should be tolerant to a rather rapid, or at times rapid, work pace. When talking about the competence areas of a project manager, we can distinguish between four rather large areas. First of all, we have the project management competencies that we have discussed throughout this course. Nowadays, a lot of business competence is also expected from a project manager, especially in technology projects like construction or product development. Technical competence is key for a project manager. And finally, but not to the least extent, a good project manager, he needs a lot of competence in organizing and a sort of social competence. It's perhaps good to remember that the foundation for all these competencies are the personality and the sort of basic character of the project manager, which obviously will have an impact on how well he or she can do in these four fields. And it may be obvious, but we have very few supermen or superwomen among us, so probably there won't be people who are extremely good at all these four areas at the same time. Some are better at technical things, some are better at maybe the social aspects of project management, and some then again have a sort of nose for business. So basically this implies that a key job of the top management in a company or the director of a project division, his job is actually to select the one project manager who is best suited for a particular project. So if it's a project that goes very much on business competence, he or she may want to pick a project manager with a particular competence in that area. If we go a bit deeper into these 4 fields, we can see that project management competence actually constitutes of all these tools and techniques that we have gone through when we talk about project planning and control. Business competence is about 2 things. It's for one thing about how you kind of see the link between your project and the firm's strategy. And on the other, it's about understanding the business needs of your customer. This way you can, for instance, anticipate better the way the customer will actually decide upon whether the project was successful or unsuccessful in the end. Technical competence is obviously about technological understanding. On the one hand, regarding the products that is being produced or developed. And on the other, the processes that are related to how this product or process is going to be used in the end. Organizational and social competence is about leadership, negotiation, communication, problem solving, and actually influencing others. Influencing others is also, in a way, part of what leadership is actually about, that you lead through others. And here you might have heard that there's a difference between what we consider leadership and what we consider management. Management is something you get a position, a power position, whereas leadership is something that you do in order to empower others, and you lead through a vision and so on. The competence requirements for a project manager may vary very much throughout the project lifecycle. So for instance, in the beginning of the project, when we have to sell the project to our customer or even to our boss, we might need this type of business understanding a bit more. Obviously, negotiation skills would be very important. During the beginning of the project, during the planning phase, all these project planning techniques and tools will come to use. During execution of the project, there might be more people issues. We have to exercise leadership. There might be a lot of problem solving involved. And then again, towards the end of the project, it might be, again, required a bit more understanding of, on the one hand, the technology and how that is going to fit into the customer's existing infrastructure and business. And on the one hand, also, maybe to some extent, some kind of business understanding of how this investment is going to produce value for the customer in the end. Is there anything you can do in order to speed up this process? Now we have talked a bit about the project manager itself, the one who leads and manages the project. What about the project team itself? I think there are some things that in general can be said about the project team. For one thing, it should every project team member should have a kind of feel and about the essence of timing and doing correct timing in a project according to what's agreed. We should be executing the project work under the direction of the project manager according to the plan. We should anticipate and manage risks in a due manner. Active communication is expected in terms of the progress and state of work. We should report deviations, preferably without the delay, and in general about project-related issue. And lastly, I think it's up to each and every team member to kind of take a personal leadership about continuously developing his or her own project competence. In a project organization, this might be really important because your sort of closest superior is a person that you might not see very often because you work so tightly under a project manager. And therefore, I think it's important for every team member to kind of have this personal ownership of his own competence development. One final thing about working in projects, now talking from the perspective of the company or the whole organization. Resource utilization is a key issue, obviously, and companies quite often, especially for instance engineering firms or consultancies, use diagrams like the one showed on the slide here, where we try to monitor the capacity utilization of each and every resource or resource pool in our company. In a mature project company, we try to make sure that no resource is overloaded for a very long time at least, because this will eventually lead to problems both for the project, because the person might not be able to do all the things he promised, or for the person itself if he becomes overloaded and may get a burnout or something like that. But in immature project companies that are not that sophisticated in terms of managing organizational projects, the situation might look like this, that a person is heavily overloaded. So like you can see here from the diagram, in the beginning of the year, there is a small underload, but then projects start to pile up. The project is the resource is working on 4 or 5 projects at the same time, and way over the target level of 90%. And this is, by the way, typical that resources are assigned a certain target level which they should sort of maintain, in this case then 90%. Obviously this kind of situation should be avoided because it tends to lead to problems.